because of these lockdowns, and many analysts are now talking about a broad-based recession. My next guest has her thoughts on this. Please welcome to the show, Rebecca Walser. Thanks for being on, Rebecca. I'm going to say one thing. I'll leave it over to you. But all roads lead through China when it comes to supply chains, and if that's disrupted there with these draconian lockdowns, the knock-on effect will be severe. We just don't know how severe.
Yeah. Scott, you and I have been talking about this for, it seems like at least 6 weeks now, where we've been talking about this supply chain problem in China with their COVID zero policy. COVID zero is not sustainable. But Scott, I hate to do this to you, but I want to shift something, because everyone should be looking at what is going on in China right now and asking, could that happen here in the United States? And of course, as Americans, we all immediately retract and say, no way. But I want you to understand what's happening. Starting this Sunday, May 22nd through May 28th, this Biden administration has promulgated rule changes to the World Health Organization Treaty, and specifically the IHR, the International Health Regulations, that would cede national sovereignty of the United States away from the United States and give it to the director of the World Health Organization. And the reason that we need to care what China is doing is because China is a huge influence, I'd say the largest influence over the World Health Organization. And if the World Health Organization, if this treaty passes, which again was promulgated, written by the Biden administration themselves, what will happen is in the next globally declared pandemic, the World Health Organization director will be able to administer policy, administer supply chain changes, administer vaccinations without the consent of the United States. This is a sovereignty transfer of the United States to the World Health Organization. And I can just tell you, I believe personally as an attorney that this is treason, that there is no ability in the United States Constitution by either the executive, the legislative, or the judicial to give over any national sovereignty to an international body. And so we all need to wake up as Americans and say, what is going on here? Because China is the last country that we need to be emulating.
So, yeah, I'm gobsmacked. Obviously, you can tell that's really shocking to me. And that would be something that would be extremely important. So taking that back to even our markets here, Rebecca, where does that put us now with that type of thing in the off or in the wings? What do we do with these markets here in the States?
Well, Scott, it affects everything, right? Because if we have another pandemic, and let's be clear, we're not fully out of Corona yet. Obviously, Corona is shutting down. China is shut down. Shanghai is shut down. People are jumping out of buildings to their deaths because they have been locked up in in their apartments for so long. So what we have to understand that obviously the supply chain affects everything of how the world moves. And I think now we can sort of maybe take a 2-second think about this and say, maybe we shouldn't have depended so much on China. Maybe we shouldn't have had every manufacturing impacted in just China. We didn't get diversified supply chains like we should have under Trump, as we should have with his trade policy war. We didn't get them. And now we're paying the price. But if we have the World Health Organization telling us how we have to act as Americans during a global pandemic, they could shut us down. They could create FEMA camps. We are talking about such massive changes of how the United States works economically and from a health perspective. And, we have a whistleblower who's come from the United Nations. I can't say their name, but basically they're saying this is the plan to move us to kind of a one world government under the United Nations using the World Health Organization. Because, Scott, to their credit, it is hard to deal with a global pandemic when the sea of travel and people travel by plane very quickly and things do affect the globe. But I don't think that Americans are ready to cede their sovereignty over how they handle global international health pandemics in the United States to the World Health Organization. And if that happens, it does impact economics, because they will have the authority to tell us what we have to do, if we have to quarantine, where we have to quarantine, what our medications are.
Man.
This is serious. This is serious. And the mainstream is not talking about this. And I just don't understand why. One of my state senators, Rick Scott, state of Florida, basically came out with a tweet on Saturday and said, we are ceding national sovereignty to the World Health Organization. Is anybody going to talk about this? Wake up. What is going on? It's not being talked about, Scott.
Well, to your point, I mean, no, it's not being talked about because you just opened my eyes to it, number one. Number two is, you know what I'd like to do is, I'm sure you know that show, Shark Tank, right? And I love this. I love the show, right? It's interesting.
Me
And I think
too.
it's taught a lot of people about how to run companies and you know, fractions and what something's worth and what something's not worth. But you know what I'd like to see going forward, Rebecca, is how many times they say, well, I can get your costs down if I outsource everything to China. I wonder if that stops on that show, because it seems like that's the first go-to that they talk to people about when they're trying to drive down their costs. You know what I mean?
That's right. That's right. When they're producing and they're manufacturing, their first thing is let's outsource it to China and get the cost down. And that's a problem. And it's a huge problem. And we had a warning, Scott. This country under Trump, we had the trade war. We had a warning that said, hey, literally think about this. Our pharmaceuticals come mostly from China. So we have a COVID outbreak from China that we then have to turn to China to get them to ship us our drugs. Does that make any sense? What are we doing?
Well, hey, listen, what doesn't make it, the whole thing didn't make any sense, right? I'll never forget My America, and I was on a lot of different networks talking about it, but there was a time during the 2020 shutdown where you had one side of the street, the hairdressers and the grocery store was open, and literally on the other side of the street, it was mandated to be closed. I could not believe that was My America. I really couldn't believe it, but it got only worse from there. So I hopefully think we've learned some lessons. I think we have. But I tell you what, this big bombshell you just dropped on me here today, I'm going to look into some more, because that's very, very serious. And I really, really appreciate you doing that. So thank you very much, Rebecca. That's awesome content. That's always a great reason to have you on the show. You're definitely coming back. I love it. Thank you very much. Rebecca Walser from Tampa, Florida. Thank you very much